Council's long-term plan is a plan that lays out what we're going to do, how we're going to pay for it, and when we're going to do it. While it's a 10-year plan, it's also accompanied by a 30-year infrastructure strategy. And within the 10-year plan itself, the first year is an annual plan, and years 2 to 10 are projections of what we're going to do.
This is probably the most challenging long-term plan that's been in front of this council for a very long time. And a lot of that is driven by the storm effects and the challenges that it's put in front of our council that we have to deal with and we have to incorporate into the long-term plan. We are going out to consult with our communities on the plan, the consultation document that we want their feedback on. All councils are facing significant cost increases from inflation, from fuel increases, from interest, and the cost of doing business, which affects councils just like every other council. So, Aileen, you would see this at an operational level. It's affecting the ability of you and your staff to do the job and to cost and budget the projects that we need to do going forward.
The starting point for this year's LTP is difficult, and following the North Island weather events of last year, we open with depleted reserves, so our emergency reserves are now empty and they need to be rebuilt. And last year we held down our depreciation funding, which means the amount of money we set aside to renew our assets. And we did that to try and manage the rates increase in the midst of the storms last year. But now's catch-up year. We've got to start refilling those reserves and we have to start funding our depreciation fully. We also face a range of compliance challenges with our, particularly around our waters. So our potable water is now subject to regulations that are making us lift the standard of delivery, which means more cost. We also have the water quality regulations flowing through into the resource consents we hold, which means more cost into funding our assets to the required environmental standard.
I think that's one of the key points, and it's something that is important that we get that balance right. We're very much community driven, so we engage with our communities to find out what are the priorities, what things do we need to deliver for you in terms of services and projects for each part of the district, and getting that balance right between the things that we are required to do and the things that we want to do and need to do for our communities.
Council went through quite a robust prioritisation process whereby we put all the projects up. We looked at them for factors such as, are they required as a compliance measure, are they high risk, and we also ran the ruler over it for what can we actually physically deliver. And bearing in mind we needed to get the roading projects to deal with the damage from the cyclones last year, we had to get that up the front. Those are a priority, particularly given the funding that we had available from central government to get those fixed. Then what that's meant is that many of those large ticket items have gone up to the top of the priority list, and there's quite a few projects that have dropped off because we simply haven't got the resources or the rates rise capacity to get them done in the next financial year. We'll get those essentials done first and then get to those other projects.
So there's a few things that are really leapt out as part of this process that we're going through. One thing that's I think is a real asset and a benefit to our communities is that our council is ahead of the game because of the 3.5-4 years of work that we started in getting us ready for climate change adaptation. It's the responsible position for our council to make sure that we are ready for that, and a lot of our long-term planning prioritisation has been in ensuring that we are following those climate change adaptation pathways, and that means coastal protection. It means planning for our communities to make sure that they are sensibly and responsibly planned and constructed and built. But it's about being prepared for the future, financially and in terms of creating those environments which are safe for our communities in future years.
Yeah, so the first 3 years are really focused on planning. We've got quite a lot to do to look at, designs and consents and how they're going to be funded and those sorts of things. So the first 3 years is relatively low cost, but it's planning for the future. The big projects, we assume they'll come sort of kick in around year 7 of the LTP. So what that means is we've got 3 years to do some planning, and then next LTP we'll be able to nail down some of the detail before we actually commence those projects.
Some of the work that needs to be done has already started, particularly in that roading area, and you're going to see that work ongoing. Councils definitely have a role to play and responsibility for infrastructure, but there's a wider role which goes to the well-being and the economic well-being of our communities that council has a particular role in. So we've had discussions with a number of our business stakeholders, our business associations, our business owners, and there's a very clear message that a thriving business community contributes to a thriving community in general. With a little bit of assistance, which we've been able to give them through the recovery program, the recovery funds that we've had from the government, they produce extraordinary results. So we're seeing very clear evidence that if we support our business community, then they deliver results over and above the investment that we make. So that's a decision that our council needs to make, and we're interested to hear from our communities about the level of support that we give to our businesses and our economic well-being of our communities.
And alongside that, we found as we were in recovery, we had some excellent relationships formed. One with our business associations, who we're very grateful for the work they did across the peninsula and staying in contact with us about what was going on. And alongside that, and it's almost joined up with that, is the social recovery. With the roads out the way they were, we had all sorts of social issues that created impact on our people, and we found that council had a role to play in facilitating, and in the social service area, council is not a delivery agent, but it certainly has a role facilitating, and that's something we are looking to take forward into our LTP with a little bit of a focus on how we actually do that facilitation and connect agencies for a collective and better impact. We've already just talked about the scale of the challenges we face, and so what that means is actually we've got quite a big increase in rates potentially over the next couple of years. So what we've done in the consultation document is propose different ways of handling that, and the preferred option of council was to smooth the rates so that the rates rise is fairly consistent over the first 3 years, rather than it being large in year 1 and then smaller rates rises in years 2 and 3. But there are options there for feedback, and council welcomes that feedback.
So this is a really important area that council needs to focus on, because as we've already talked about on the climate change issue, we have 400 kilometres of coastline, and almost all of that coastline is a roading network. Early on in 2023, we started putting a very intense amount of focus on the work that we do with the Regional Land Transport Committee, and the aim was to reprioritise the focus of the investment planning that committee does onto climate change and resilience, and to make sure that there was adequate funding through that committee to enable us to build resilience into our long-term roading network. So there's some good work being done there. There's some commitment for funding, which is going to help us re-establish our roading network and build back better so that we're well prepared for the future. This work is ongoing. There's a lot more to do, but there's a lot of preparatory work that's already been done, and some of that work's already been started.
So following the events of the cyclones, council engage quite closely with Waka Kotahi, because our roading network is exactly that, it's a network. Some of the roads are state highways and some of them are local roads, but we realised that the network needs to stand as a whole, not in different pieces. So we've been working with Waka Kotahi over the last year on a resilience case. And if anyone's driven over State Highway 25A recently, it really is beautiful. And the work that's gone into that, that sort of work needs to go into the rest of the peninsula to keep it resilient in the long term. So we're working quite closely with Waka Kotahi to get that funded over a long-term program, say a 15 to 20 year type program. So we propose in the next year to be working with them to get that up and running, funded, and start getting work out on the road to lift the resilience of our roading. There's a number of uncertainties as we go out to consult on the LTP, and some of these will become more certain as we get closer to adopting in July. But things like Three Waters, the legislation is being enacted as we speak, and so the Three Waters is in the long-term plan. We have uncertainties around roading funding, and at some point we'll find out what our actual roading funding is going to look like, but we have our best assumptions in there at the moment. Resource Management Act, we have uncertainties about what that's going to look like going forward. And in particular, we have uncertainty around how climate change pathways may be funded into the future. So we've made the best assumptions we can, and we do have opportunity to update those in subsequent annual plans and subsequent long-term plans.
One of the challenges for us as a council is that there are certain areas that we're working in that we know for a fact it's not possible for us as a council and for our ratepayers to carry the entire cost burden of the things that need to be done into the future. So we have to make an assumption about levels or not of government support, and we have to put those assumptions into our financial sectors of our long-term plan. We make the best guess. We might get it wrong, but we are in the same position as many other councils when they're having to make plans for the future and make these assumptions based on the levels of uncertainty that exists in the political environment at central government level.
And the community can have a level of confidence around our assumptions because firstly we work through them and test them, and then we're fully audited before any long-term plan is adopted, and audit will look at the reasonableness of those assumptions.